Strike when the iron is hot. Awesome. And so welcome initially to our attendees that are trickling in. We're really grateful that y'all made time for today's session. We'll open slowly to give folks just a touch more time to settle in before we dig into the heart of today's content. Again, big thanks to our Safe States team, Kristen, Lindsay, and Hannah for spearheading all of the organizational, logistic planning that made today possible. Big thanks to Katie for the content that she's contributed. Okay. And I see we're just at the top of the hour. So again, as more folks are able to join, we will be excited to welcome them. But just to make the most of our limited time together, we'll go ahead and get started. So in the event your calendar invite didn't specify, welcome to a Safe States Alliance webinar, Career Planning Amidst Uncertainty. So understanding that our field is undergoing different changes, we want to be sure that our early career professionals, as well as our students who are newer to our field, have some tools to make strategic professional decisions that put them in a position to serve injury and violence prevention effectively, as well as meet their own personal needs. A little bit of context before we dig into that discussion. You're here because you've at least peripherally heard of Safe States Alliance, but this is a really wonderful community to be a part of broadly, but especially as we are in the midst of some big changes, some new challenges as a field. Having a supportive professional community is a really protective thing to be connected with, both to receive resources like the ones that we're going to talk through today, as well as supportive mentorship, and different even peer networking opportunities can be really beneficial. So if Safe States Alliance is not an organization that you're formally affiliated with yet, we really encourage you to do so. In the event your membership is coming to a close, we want to give this opportunity to kind of renew that. So we're here to talk about decisions. I know that that's, for me at least, was probably harder than finishing terminal degrees, was deciding what to do with them afterwards. So at the core of this session are kind of three questions that we anticipate could be looming on a lot of folks' mind in this chapter. Do I search for an opportunity in traditional public health spaces? Do I pursue an opportunity where I think I can still make an impact on public health and safety outcomes, but in a non-traditional setting? Or do I pursue additional professional training to expand my skill set beyond what I have currently? So certainly, there's nuance and caveats even within those three buckets, but broadly, for many folks on the call, those might be kind of the three categories that they are discerning between. So the question that we're hoping to answer is, where can I best serve myself and the mission of injury and violence prevention, potentially between working in a traditional public health setting, working in a non-traditional health setting, but still having a public health and safety impact, or pursuing professional training as a precursor to doing one of those two things. So to join you in the discussion today, I've been talking so far, so I'll introduce myself first. My name is Hannah Rochford. I'm an early career professional in the injury and violence field. My focus is as a researcher, but I also have the pleasure of acting as Safe States Alliance Student and Early Career Professional Special Interest Group Chair, or the SECP SIG. So really briefly, I will also plug that interest group in the context of the larger Safe States Alliance. Safe States Alliance has a lot of great interest groups broadly, but if you are a student and early career professional, there may be particular value to you in joining not just Safe States Alliance, but our student and early career special interest group. So we can certainly be in touch if that's of interest. But I'm also delighted to introduce Katherine formally, Katie informally, because she's cool that way, Brumfield. She is joining us as a career services professional. She's currently with the Colorado School of Public Health, and we're delighted that she is guest speaking for the Safe States Alliance. So thank you very much, Katie. Is there anything you'd like to add to your own introduction before we kick things off?
No, I'm just excited to be here. I'm excited for you all to take away some pieces of information that can help you in either deciding a career path or making decisions on careers. And I'm looking forward to sharing my expertise.
Perfect. Very grateful. We're excited too. All right, so the first portion of our discussion today, we're going to look inward, right? Before we are going to be in a position to make decisions, right, that serve ourselves well as advance the mission of injury and violence prevention. These are some things that we probably should be grounded in as a foundation for making those prudent decisions. So first portion, we're going to talk about understanding our personal mission. Second, we're going to talk about itemizing our personal needs list. Third, we're going to spend a little time focusing on the balance between needs and goals in the short term, as well as setting ourselves up to grow in the direction that will offer us long-term security, long-term fulfillment. Finally, location, geographically and otherwise, finding a balance between ideal opportunities and ideal locations can be a challenge. So we'll talk through some strategies there. So first, our personal mission. So very, very simply put, I would think of a mission as an outcome I want to impact and the mechanism through which I want to do so. So sitting with this a little bit, that sounds pretty simple, but it's actually a pretty large question, right? What is my mission? What impact do I ultimately want to make? So that's unfortunately, a question that only you can answer. But having really explicit clarity on that is a first step in making these decisions is necessary to be sure that your personal mission and the mission of any sort of organization, any sort of project that you are working with and for have alignment. If there's not alignment there, then we probably aren't in the right opportunity, in the right professional setting for us. So as an example, I would define my personal mission as identifying and advancing policy opportunities to prevent and respond to violent harm. Right? So there's lots and lots of ways to contribute to injury and violence prevention. I, as a researcher, am really interested in using my research skills to identify those policy opportunities. And I'm really interested in using my skills as a writer to create translation documents that help advance those to decision makers, practitioners in general. If I was someone who, say, had a more practice focus, more of a teaching focus, or otherwise I had different professional gifts, that mission would still be important, but it wouldn't read this way. So that's really what my first invitation for you all would be, is to think about the outcomes that you want to focus on. For me, again, love our unintentional injury professional folks. Intentional injury outcomes or violence is really where my heart is. So that's also reflected in my personal mission. So even take a minute. And again, if you'd like, if it's helpful to you to kind of write it out as you process, or even if you're interested in kind of helping others on the call have additional examples, I encourage you all to maybe put, even if it's an outline structure, itemize your outcome and mechanism in the chat, or if you have kind of a nice tight sentence ready to go, feel free to offer that now. But really, first and foremost, we have to have clarity here before we are in a place to make any sort of successful decision thereafter. Next, I have a mission I want to advance, but I also have bills to pay. I also have needs, right, logistically that have to be met. And that's sort of a, crude oversimplification, but we can walk through different types of needs, right? We have physical, financial needs. We also have very important mental, social, emotional needs. And a really great orienting question for coming up with our needs checklist actually was a suggestion from Katie, is what do I want my day-to-day life to look like, right? If I'm grounded in my vision for my day-to-day existence, I'm going to be in a much better position to itemize the things that are important to me from a physical and financial perspective, as well as a mental, social, emotional perspective. So starting on the physical and financial is maybe the bottom tier, our lowest, our foundational on our Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Um, Financial resources. They're very important, right? So having a number in mind in terms of based on my expected expenses, based on my loans, based on again other personal responsibilities that I have, based on again my day-to-day life of I know I like to go out for coffee, or I know that I like to travel. I would need about how much money to feel financially secure. Um, Second, health insurance, right, or those peripheral benefits can be also really, really key to consider here. I know that I need health insurance. I know that I need such and such coverage based on, again, my health status, based on my personal goals. Those are things to consider. And also intersecting with that financial security. I know that I'm probably not going to be in a great position if I'm paying more than X amount of dollars for that coverage. Maybe someone is in a position where childcare is a factor for them, or maybe they're caregiving for instead an older generation and they need to know that those resources exist. Um, Perhaps I'm someone who knows that I'm not going to go back to school right now, but I know that additional training is really important to me. An employer that would offer loan forgiveness or tuition support that isn't necessarily directly a part of my pay, but that's still a function of my financial circumstance, that's really important to consider. Shifting to the other side of the screen, mental, social, emotional needs. So outside of physical well-being, outside of financial status, things that are important to my existence. Again, these are things that are really super critical to having a day-to-day existence that feels secure, feels fulfilling. Maybe it's I need to be within driving distance of my family. Maybe I know that my mental health is much better when I can work from home at least part of the time. Maybe I understand that really close working relationships with good coworkers, with good mentors, is critical for me to feel socially fulfilled in my job. Maybe again, I'm a travel bug and I know that um, rather than the 10 days that is standard for a lot of positions, I need maybe closer to 2 weeks of time off. And again, these are all just examples of needs that could come up as you are reflecting on this core. What do I want my day-to-day life to look like question with regards to physical and financial needs and with regards to mental, social, and emotional needs. So that's sort of phase one of this needs checklist. So phase two of this needs checklist is getting really granular about which of our needs are hardline needs, which of our needs absolutely cannot budge under any circumstances, are a must, 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 and which of our needs are maybe we'll call soft line items, needs that we would have a little flexibility on under certain circumstances. So adapting our examples from our first slide to kind of show that hardline, soft line difference. So regarding physical and financial needs, maybe my hardline needs in bold, I know I have to have this type of health insurance. That's absolutely a non-negotiable. And I also need to know that I have really solid childcare options and a guarantee from my employer that I'll be able to leave by 5 p.m. so that I can go meet the caregiving needs that I'm responsible for providing. But maybe I have more of a soft line need around the salary amount. I would really like 70,000, but if I was in an area that was really walkable, that had a lot of public transit options, maybe I could forego having a car and therefore a car payment, a car insurance payment, car maintenance costs, and gas costs, and maybe I could be pretty comfortable under 60 at $60,000, contingent on those circumstances being present. Shifting to the other side of the screen to our mental, social, emotional needs. Hard lines, maybe I know that I need to be in driving distance of my family. I want to be able to get back in case of an emergency if I have older parents. Maybe I have siblings that are going through major life events like they're having children or they're getting married, and I want to be close for those milestone events. Um, and I know that I need to have positive relationships with my coworkers and mentors. I've been in situations where that wasn't the case, and that's super, super critical to me. But maybe my soft line items are the ability to work from home. That would be really lovely. But in the event the position required that and kind of build that rapport, and I could maybe have a day or two a week eventually, I could be comfortable with that. And again, I would love the 15 or more days off of work, but I could make 10 work if I really needed to, if everything else was perfect. So, reiterating, personal mission first, grounding ourselves in the personal mission, and then grounding ourselves in this needs checklist. In what do I absolutely have to have as part of my self analysis on the physical and financial front, and the mental, social, emotional front. And then phase two of that needs checklist is massaging which of these can I absolutely not budge on, which of these do I have some flexibility. And that brings us next to this eye towards growth, right? There's a balancing act between where am I right now and where would I like to be positioned. For example, graduate programs, right? Maybe if I'm looking ahead at continuing my education, those can be tough. Right? Our income levels are probably not sky high in that situation, and maybe we don't have the work-life balance that we would otherwise strive for in a different type of employment. But by going through that additional training, I'm in a better position for the opportunities I would like to have long term, right? So having this assessment against the needs checklist can be helpful, right? So the core reflection question here is what I'm seeking now going to position me for the life that I'd like to have in the future? And here's some kind of example questions circling back to the needs that we just identified. So one, related to the work from home piece. If I'm someone who would exclusively like to work from home, but I'm also someone who knows that networking, mentorship, having that strong professional community is important to me. It's important for securing opportunities I would like to have in the future. Is working from home going to maybe impede my ability to build some of those relationships? And accordingly, how am I going to balance that short-term need or preference with that long-term goal? Second, maybe I don't need to navigate childcare or resources for older adult care now. But if I expect, my family circumstances to shift at some point, are those resources even available in the place that I'm existing with the organization that I'm considering affiliating myself with? Third, I know I'll be expected to have a more advanced credential than what I have currently. Is there going to be tuition support in this position? Or am I better suited to take another position that maybe doesn't meet as many of my soft line needs, but would support me with that hard line need? So very broadly, again, the balancing act, the needs checklist is really focused on the here and now, but also allowing those needs to intersect with needs that we anticipate in the future, as well as goals that we would like to achieve in the long term. Finally, location. Right. It's one thing to find a perfect opportunity. It's something very different to find a perfect opportunity in a perfect place. Well, that's a great aspiration. We probably need to be prepared to kind of enter some of these professional search conversations with, again, an understanding of self, of what we're comfortable with in terms of location. Right. So let's say that I'm up in this upper left green dot, and I really like it here. Am I willing to relocate? And maybe my answer is a little bit, right? Maybe I'm comfortable going about as far as this blue dot, but not any further, um, for a whole slew of different reasons. Um, Maybe alternatively, I'm comfortable going a little bit further, still being in the same region, because now I'm closer to my support system or other folks who need to be in touch with me. Maybe I am going or willing to go as far as this blue dot because it's in the same time zone, it's in the same region, um, but I don't love the idea of shifting to a different region for any number of reasons. Maybe there's other locations that we would consider only if absolutely all of our hardline and softline needs were met, and only if we knew that we wouldn't have to stay there forever. Maybe there's other locations that we know for any number of reasons would not be an option for us. You know, that could be a function of political ideologic climate. That could be a function of not being within reach of, again, people that we are caretaking for, etc. But in the same way that we need to itemize um, or intersect our long-term goals with our short-term needs checklist, we also need to place that needs checklist and long-term goal list in context of geography. Where could we exist for a little bit? Where would we really love to be? How far from that ideal are we willing to go? And again, there's no right or wrong answers to any of those questions, but entering these decision-making processes, having those internal answers in hand will go a long way. So, a few other complementary reflection questions on this location item, right? How far am I willing to go for the right opportunity? How far am I able to go for the right opportunity? Do the opportunities I'd like to have exist where I'd like to be? Right. So I grew up in Iowa. Maybe I'm someone who really loves the feel of a super rural community. Right. So if I would love to live in Frontier, Montana, but I also would like to work for a large research institution. The overlap in those Venn diagrams isn't very big, right? So that becomes an important discernment opportunity of which of those preferences is going to be more important to me. How would relocating impact others in my life? Right. So we've touched on this a little bit. Maybe I'm caring for children. Maybe I have parents or other folks in my life who need my kind of custodial support. But maybe I also have a partner or significant other who could potentially be impacted if I took a job in another location, even if it was a really great opportunity. How do I feel about that? Similarly, could I be in a place that I knew wasn't a forever home, in the event I had a great opportunity temporarily, right? Could I take a 2-year contract someplace, or could I take a position for a period I knew was finite? Could I go across the country for a PhD program that I knew was going to take me 4 or 5 years? Am I comfortable relocating if it's only temporary? Do I like the idea of working where I'm needed, or do I like the idea of working where there's a lot of existing resources and support? So we understand that state to state, there's a lot of variability in public health infrastructure. There's a lot of variability in how robust injury and violence prevention programming is, where dedicated research centers for those topics are. Do I like the idea of being surrounded by a lot of that existing infrastructure where folks understand the mission and they're excited about it? Or is it more aligned with the impact that I'm trying to make to be working in spaces that there's maybe some challenges, right, per that lack of existing support and infrastructure, but where my impact is potentially even more needed? So that's a question to circle back with in regard to your personal mission. Finally, are there a multitude of opportunities in this area? Because it's completely possible that an opportunity that looks great on paper, that's aligned with our mission, that meets all of our needs and would position us to have success with future goals, um, there's only one in that area, right? So if it turns out to not be a great fit, then we're kind of in a position where we're needing to make a second major change in location. So it can be kind of an insurance policy to me relocating to a place where there's not just one great opportunity, but there's a series of opportunities that might be a good fit for us. Second, we're going to shift to a discussion of our market analysis. So, um, self-analysis was first, again, kind of looking inward. Market analysis, the theme of this conversation, is going to be looking outward. So, what are my assets? Where can I apply my assets to make an impact? Where can I be stable? And where can I feel professionally at home? Are kind of the reflection questions that will orient this portion of our discussion around. So first, what are my assets? In the same way that our needs checklist kind of had two different categories, we're going to similarly divide this sublist into two different categories. So technical skills, these are things that we've really been taught how to do. So I've got some examples that would reflect me. So through my graduate training, I learned how to apply quasi-experimental methods. I learned certain coding languages. I've learned other research methods around legal epidemiology or systematically assessing different types of policies, mixed methods, so integrating quantitative and qualitative findings. I've also come to be familiar with academic and policy-oriented writing styles as distinct writing styles from other types. Interpersonal skills. So these are skills that we maybe haven't taken explicit classes on necessarily, but we've no less picked them up along the way, and they are no less critical to our professional success. So one thing, I think most people who work with me would say that when I'm holding a leadership role, I'm pretty organized. I try to keep careful notes. I try to be sure that folks have a really tangible sense of what our next steps are and related timelines. I try to be an empathetic communicator. I want the folks who I'm working with to feel safe and heard and when they're interacting with me. I try to be attentive to details. I try to be proactive if I anticipate a concern or I see an opportunity for a positive change. And I also try to be dependable, following through on the tasks that I accept. So again, this is maybe a great opportunity for folks to engage in the chat. If you have kind of an immediate list of technical skills that you know you have and that you think could kind of help someone else's brainstorm, feel free to offer those. Similarly, if you have some interpersonal skills that you think are particularly valuable to you professionally, would encourage you to offer those now. So second, once we have an understanding of what our assets are, we can start to consider where might I apply these, right? So two sub-reflection questions are who needs my skills and where do my unique combination of credentials and lived experiences position me to be particularly effective, right? So who needs my skills? Good news for us, public health is really generalizable. Public health, the need for it will never go away. So understanding that a lot of our injury and violence prevention folks have sort of that public health discipline background, there's a lot of people and a lot of entities that could benefit from the skill sets that you have, both from a technical perspective as well as from an interpersonal skill perspective. Second question is a little more specific to each of us as individuals. We not only have this professional credentialing, this professional training, but we also have lived experiences that we can't help but take with us every day when we go to work, right? So maybe I am someone who had lived experiences with Child Protective Services. Maybe I'm someone who grew up with a family of educators, and I have a lot of understanding of what that particular sector looks like. Maybe I'm someone who had justice involvement or a prior career with law enforcement partners, or maybe I'm someone who used to be a clinician and then I got inspired to do prevention work, right? So whatever those lived experience combinations entail, considering where you may be extra effective relative to someone else with your same credentials can be valuable, right? So we know um, our lived experiences, our credentials are probably going to be wanted and welcomed in traditional public health spaces, right? So when we started our injury and violence prevention training journey, many of us pictured ourselves in traditional public health settings. These could be places like state and local health departments. These could be places like hospital systems and clinics. These could be more safety net healthcare facilities like federally qualified health centers or rural health centers. Um, these could be service providers who are actually focused on emergency response. They could also be nonprofit organizations who are working in parallel as community partners with healthcare providers as well as formally designated health departments. And the list goes on. However, we also have non-traditional settings. And I think the second reflection question on the first slide can be really helpful in seeing opportunities here. So we understand that traditional public health is experiencing some changes in infrastructure, some changes in the availability of opportunities. But regardless of those changes, we understand that the need for public health, the need to keep people healthy and safe, will be persistent, that isn't going anywhere. So as we have changes in our traditional public health infrastructure, because our needs don't change, there's potentially some expansion, some new perspectives in some of our settings that are doing public health and safety work that absolutely have a role and are acting in ways that prevent injury and violence, but just haven't thought of themselves that way, right? So that's really what we mean by non-traditional settings. So these could be things like entities involved with housing development and urban planning. We understand that housing and all of our social determinants have huge roles to play in injury and violence prevention, right? So maybe I'd never thought about working in one of these settings, but because I have a different disciplinary background than most folks who are working here, I'm going to be able to see and then act on opportunities to leverage the decisions made in these spaces to keep people healthy and safe. Similarly, insurance corporations, right? They in particular have a vested interest in people being healthy and safe and people not having unintentional or intentional injuries happen to them, right? So looking to them as potential partners to move forward different injury and violence prevention programs is potentially going to be increasingly important. Manufacturers and businesses can be relevant in a whole slew of ways, right? We have different products that we have looked to for decades to advance injury and violence prevention, right? So examples here are Stop the Bleed kits that we train people to use, car seats that we, again, train families on, that we train healthcare providers who are approving families exiting hospitals to use, folks who produce naloxone as an overdose prevention tool, smoke detectors, fall prevention tools, et cetera, are all examples of products that have to be produced by a manufacturer and are sold by that manufacturer and or subsequent businesses that could all be awesome opportunities to partner with for employment opportunities. last on this column, we have different occupational health and safety roles. These are often found in large farms, large corporations. Some of the ones that come to mind are corporations that I, again, know people who are doing injury and violence prevention work in those spaces. Companies like ExxonMobil and our energy producers, right? There are, whether it's a solar plant or whether it's an oil rig, etc., the people who are working in those spaces have very specific injury risks. Do they have the tools they need to keep their workers healthy and safe? It's better for their business to have their workers be healthy and safe, and it's better for the workers to be healthy and safe. And our professional community is in a position to make great contributions there. Mentioned education a little bit earlier, and we understand again, education as a huge social determinant of health positions people to have key social emotional tools that are protective against injury and violence, positions folks to have the information they need to make safe choices for themselves and their family, etc. Higher education houses a lot of community partnerships. It houses a lot of research opportunities. So that's another great opportunity to make an impact. Law and justice sectors, again, particularly in the intentional injury space, but also in the unintentional injury space, there's relevance here. The way that we respond to certain acts of harm can either elevate the risk of future harm or curtail it. Faith-based organizations, these are often great partners in carrying these missions forward. And we know that our academic research institutions are similarly making key contributions, and our military professionals have need in this space, and there have been historic investments in making sure that they have a safety-forward prevention workforce. So, traditional and non-traditional opportunities aside, the kind of third potential decision bucket that we opened our session with related to continuing education, right? So I wanted to spend a little bit of time discussing what maybe we would do in the event you know that you would need additional professional assets, or if you enter an opportunity and then you learn, oh, I do actually think I'm going to need to sharpen my skills a little bit. I want to acknowledge that this continuing education option exists on a continuum, and so it's not necessarily an either or with our other pathways, right? So it's totally possible that I could take a traditional or non-traditional setting opportunity and then be taking concurrent workshops, right, that don't take a ton of time and energy and don't have a ton of associated expenses. Then moving up the continuum a little bit, maybe I would need something a little more formal with technical training, some certifications, but not something that would confer an additional degree per se. It's also possible that maybe I'm someone who has an associate's and would like to seek a bachelor's. I have a bachelor's and would like to seek a master's, or even a terminal degree of some sort. So all of these are possible options, but I want to offer a few specific, whoopsies, notes about when each might be appropriate. So our lower end continuing education, not a ton of risk involved in pursuing many of these, whereas our master's and doctoral level probably have some associated costs with them, have more of a time investment with them. So we just really want to be intentional and being sure that we're not pursuing continuing education kind of for lack of a better idea, but if that we're pursuing these more high cost options, we're being really intentional in entering those settings. So another complementary reflection question here is, where can I be stable, right? So we know that we have lots of settings that need our assets. We know that there's particular settings that we perhaps can be particularly effective in, but is that opportunity going to stay? Is that opportunity going to persist in the way that we hope? And we need to acknowledge, right, that because we're in a chapter of change, there's some sectors that are going to experience growth, And there's other sectors that are maybe going to have the number of opportunities they're able to offer shrink in some ways, right? So traditional public health settings probably fall into the latter category, right? We know that there's changes in funding, there are changes in public leadership priorities that are probably going to trim the volume of opportunities and the types of opportunities that are available in traditional public health settings. Now, the good news is that for all of the reasons that we've named earlier, because the needs don't go away, we can probably anticipate somewhat of an expansion in our non-traditional settings, right? So even if I'm someone who hasn't pictured myself there previously, it's important to consider that's still a key opportunity and perhaps an increasingly important area for us to make an impact. Um, Finally, again, our continuing education opportunities, our workshops, our certifications will probably be less impacted than some of our more high cost opportunities, but it may be a little bit more challenging to find a spot for an accredited program. And maybe extra challenging to have a graduate training opportunity that's funded, right? So that would give you a stipend to live on while you were pursuing your education. It may also be more challenging to, yes, that's a redundant sentence. Yeah, to find funding, to find an opportunity. But the flip side of that is there is a potential benefit because the program rosters are potentially going to be a little bit smaller. There is perhaps potential for closer working relationships with professional mentors, the instructors you'd have, the supervisors you'd have, etc. So kind of a balancing act there. We expect some shrinking in traditional public health. We expect corresponding expansion in non-traditional settings. And we expect there to be perhaps fewer higher education opportunities. But if you are able to attain one, there's perhaps opportunity for closer mentorship than normally available. So we talked a little bit about the special considerations for continuing education so far, where we gave examples of how in the short term, perhaps there's less stability, right? There's less financial resources to meet one's own needs with, but there's potential for greater long-term stability after those skill sets have been acquired. So in the event that particular option is on your mind, these are some additional reflection questions that may be crucial to sit with. So first, one that I already noted, do I have clear objectives for why I'm pursuing this training or degree, right? Making this choice and continuing education, kind of for lack of a better idea, usually isn't going to serve us well, right? Being grounded, I want this skill set and therefore I am pursuing this training will serve us well. Have I identified a mentor or advisor that I'd really like to work with, right? We know that learning happens in community, and so entering a program with certainty that you have someone who will be a good mentor, who will be a good partner with you in this learning experience is going to be key. So finding someone you'd like to work with and confirming that they're willing and able to work with you as an advisor, as a research supervisor, etc., is going to be protective. Have I met students and graduates of the program I'm interested in? Most programs look pretty awesome on their website, right? But speaking with current students and graduates of a program can help you discern if, in fact, the program that you're interested in align with your goals, align with the experiences that you're hoping to have in that program. The funding opportunities exist. This is another great opportunity to discuss with current students and graduates, as well as a program director, right? So do those funding opportunities exist? What funding, if any, is guaranteed and for how long? So for example, if I'm entering a PhD program, maybe I have guaranteed funding, but only for 4 years, right? And so I need to be thinking about that if I expect this program to take me 5 or 6 based on my conversations with current students. What do my savings currently look like? Is my emergency fund adequate to support me when I had a period of more limited income? What would my expected loan volume and income be? And are my expected student debt levels, forecasted payments, etc., all volumes that I'm comfortable with? And again, circling back to our physical financial needs, how would becoming a student shift my options for health insurance? So last thought I'll offer before we shift over to Katie's great content is where can I feel professionally at home? This is going to be really, really key, especially for our non-continuing education options, given our continuing education roles are inherently temporary. But it's important there too. If possible, we want to be in a place where we can feel comfortable, where we can feel invested in and safe, etc. So when you are interviewing for a program, when you're interviewing for a role, be sure that you're interviewing them back kind of with an eye towards that objective. Is this a place that I feel welcomed and respected? Is there's some overlap and alignment between my personal mission and those of my colleagues or this organization? Am I comfortable trying to continue to expand my network here? Are these people that I would want to build relationships with? Are my supervisors and peers interested in my growth? Is my organization motivated to make positive changes? And can they provide me examples of how they've done this in the past? These are all, again, questions to ask ourselves, to ask to appropriate others, to be sure that we land in a good place. And now I'll shift over to Katie to kind of move from our self and market analysis reflection over to some strategies.
Thank you, Hannah. That was great. So now that we have all those amazing reflection questions, now it's time to put it into action. So we are going to get going and develop some strategies here. Oh, Hannah, can you move the slide? I'm sorry. I tried to do it. And we're going to continue on with this pattern of traditional public health opportunities, non-traditional, and professional trainings. All right, before I jump into this, my background is in mental health counseling, and that is what I'm trained in. And I have been working as a career advisor for 10 years. I've been with the Colorado School of Public Health for 9 years. And I have seen a lot of people in different situations, but your mental well-being, your self-care is number one. Always, check in with yourself, figure out, your support team. If you're in a negative headspace, it can really alter your job search, and it will be hard for you to focus. It will be hard for you to find opportunities. A lot of times people tend to talk themselves out of applying for jobs, or negative self-talk, like, I don't think I can do that, or I don't have that, or things like that. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, step back, check in with yourself, and try to reframe. Create small, achievable goals for yourself, celebrate the wins, identify the things you can control and you can't control. I mean, a lot of job search, a lot of applying for jobs, a lot of the world with the job market, we can't control, so we can't dwell on those things. I always like to tell people, try to make your job search fun. Try to grab a buddy and go to a coffee shop or make your environment fun. I always save my favorite podcasts for tasks I don't really enjoy doing. So make your environment fun. Check in with other people going through the same thing. I think when you can bond with others, recognize any type of feelings of burnout too, and walk away. You shouldn't be job searching all day, every day. I would say definitely try to create a schedule for yourself, which I'll go into. But burnout is real, whether you're currently working in public health, or somewhere else, or in your job search. So recognize it, walk away, and take care of yourself, more importantly. All right, next slide. All right, let's get organized here. Job search can feel very overwhelming. Where do I start? What do I do? For traditional public health, I like people to look at companies. Make a list of all the public health companies in your area or areas you would be willing to travel or live in. You can utilize state public health agencies. So each state has a public health association that is connected to the American Public Health Association. As resources, you can utilize lots of different resources, but make a list of companies. There are a few job boards that I have listed here under resources that you can check out too. Connect with previous colleagues, classmates, preceptors, public health professionals that you may know or have worked with. You can certainly try to attend some conferences, networking events, create a job search schedule that includes a variety of job search tasks. So reaching out, I like to say, once a week, I'm going to try to reach out to 2 people I already know. I'm going to try to do an informational interview with someone that works at an organization I don't know. And then I'm going to spend 2 hours looking for jobs online and an hour applying to one job a week. Whatever that may look like for you. Don't try to do everything all at once. Try to spread it out and try to do it when you have energy and you're in a positive mindset. Maybe go for a walk and then sit down and do it. Talk to a friend, then sit down and do it. But really get creative in your job search and utilize the resources that are out there. There's lots of resources out there. I love the Public Health Millennial podcast. Publichealthcareers.org is a great website. And there's just a lot of good ones out there that you can access for resources to help you keep your job search going. All right, next slide. Here I wanted to list a few example job titles and companies that you might be looking for. Job titles in public health can kind of be all over the board. So I really like people to think about first companies, looking for companies, then thinking about keywords. And don't be afraid to click on a job title that maybe you're like, I have no idea what that does. And read to see if it's in alignment with what you would like to do. A lot of times I see specialists, coordinators, managers, assistants. It can be kind of all over the board. All right, keep going here. Strategies for non-traditional settings. So as Hannah has mentioned before, the public health workforce has become shrinking in their job opportunities. So we have to kind of expand and get creative on where do we see ourselves. And I can argue there's a public health job in every organization. The competencies that public health professionals gain, whether, in practice or in schooling, are very transferable to all organizations. So look into companies that hire people that do what you want to do. If project management is a skill you want to keep doing, if building relationships and networks and that community engagement, utilize LinkedIn. I like using the search bar on LinkedIn with keywords and then put in hiring and then search the posts. So that's a great way to see people posting jobs that are hiring with those keywords that you're looking for. You can also click on people and search for people that do what you want to do and see where they're working, and then Google those companies. It's really like kind of getting curious online and trying to find these companies. AI is also a great resource. I'm always in ChatGPT saying, what are the top companies hiring remote project managers? Or what are the top health companies hiring Or what are the companies in Denver, Colorado hiring for community health educators, whatever. So mix up your searches and it will scan the internet and provide you with some current job postings and company names. Informational interviews are amazing. It's a great way to gain insight about a particular industry or company with the the job market being as competitive as it is, knowing someone in an organization will help a lot. Don't be afraid to reach out to people asking to schedule an informational interview and learning about their career path and what they do. Don't be afraid to ask people you know if they know anyone that work at such and such or does such and such, and if they can connect you. If you're currently like in an undergrad program or graduated from an undergrad or graduate program, reach back out to your career center. Career advisors at universities are very helpful, and usually there's a pretty good alumni network that you can tap into. Make a list of people you already know and then go from there. I like to say be curious, be creative, and be flexible because there's a lot out there, and the more creative and curious you can be, the more opportunities there will be for you. And here's some more resources. Again, some example job titles and companies. We kind of already touched on, insurance companies, education, foundations and associations, hospitals, large nonprofits, pharmaceutical companies, and then digital health are also good companies that you could look at. And oh, examples, strategies for continuing education. Okay. This one, again, work backwards. I would say do a job search analysis now, find the jobs you might want in the future, look for what trainings are they asking for, what certifications, what degrees, making sure that you are aligning your education with the jobs that you want in the future. I also like to look at people on LinkedIn to see what type of certifications and degrees they have in job titles I might want in the future. Research programs, map it out. So pick your top 3, and then what do you need to get to each one, and trust your gut. A lot of times when I'm working with people, it's a lot of like, I don't know if I should apply. I don't know. Maybe I'll wait till next year. Just trust your gut, and you have to apply to be considered. And I always say knock on every door and see which one opens. And that's a lot of how career paths end up. Very rarely is a career path just like this. And it's, I never thought I'd be a career advisor for a public health school. I thought I'd work at a career center at an undergrad university. So trust your gut and get organized, work backwards. Here's some other examples of resources of where you can look at trainings and courses. All right, next slide. Here's some example certifications and trainings that I tend to see quite a bit in public health arena. One that I don't have on here that I've been talking more and more about is AI and machine learning for healthcare professionals. And that is our presentation. We would love to take questions. And we just end with this quote, because where you are right now doesn't have to determine where you end up. I think that your career path will evolve, and I've been in public health for 9 years, and this career has changed throughout those 9 years, and it will continue to change, but you all are meant to do this work, and you will do this work.
Well said, Katie. Thanks so much for walking through those closing strategies. So just to be sure that folks can really ask questions openly, I think our Safe States team was going to close the recording at this stage. But checking in the chat, feel free to add questions there. Feel free to use the Q&A function to offer those. In the event you have questions occur to you later, getting in touch with the Safe States team can connect you to Lindsay, or excuse me, not Lindsay. Lindsay's one of our Safe States team members that you would connect you to Katie and to me, and we'd be glad to help support questions that come to you after our session is closed.
Also, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm always providing career advice and job opportunities.
But while we let people ruminate, I do maybe just want to re-highlight the concept that you just approached